listening to the 14th source for all geek and nerd news and discussion, which means that you're listening to a podcast.
For all intents and purposes.
I am Bethel.
And I'm Andrew Asplund.
And we are your two overeducated, codependent nerd hosts, bringing you the things that we like to talk about, but filtered through inquisitive and critical lenses in the episode for Friday, September 15th, 2023. I don't know why my voice is not recovered from 3 weeks of teaching now, but here I am.
No, you sound great.
Losing my voice.
It's rustic.
It is. But you know what makes me happy, Andrew? And I've actually... I've been thinking about this. I think actually 2023 has been a pretty good year for video games, just in general. Like, I think I've played not a lot of video games over the year, but I feel like we've had a lot of really good indie games with things like Dredge, right? And if you're into like the AAA space, like there have been some good games that came out this year as well. Like Starfield seems to be being pretty well received, and I don't know. It seems like a good year.
Yeah.
Like at the beginning of the year for me, like I'm still in the throes of Metroid fandom, and they released Metroid Prime Remastered on the Switch, so I can finally play this game that I heard about for years. I talked about it on the show, and actually got to play and found it incredibly enjoyable. It just, I don't know. 2023 to me, I feel like in hindsight will be a video game year. And I'm happy about that. Which is interesting.
Because it certainly will be a video game year.
Because video games will be dead by next year.
Not dead, but yeah.
Expensive.
No, so it's funny because this week apparently the big news was that Unity is the company that makes the engine that a lot of companies use to develop their games. Not everyone, right? But it's it's a very easy to implement system for making games on multi-platform. Right.
It's one of a couple like main engines that are out there, right? And again, we're going through like basics here, but explaining what we mean by like licensing out game engines to develop games on.
Right. So if you imagine, like, I want to make a game, let's say that, right? You have to basically write all the code, right? Mm-hmm. You have to figure out how to start from the most basic.
Right.
And there are things, there are systems in place, like depending on the platform, that make it a little bit easier. But it's still like you have to like figure out, how do I put stuff on the screen? How is my game going to handle things?
And do I have to do everything? Right.
And once a game reaches a certain level of complexity, there's the idea of like, well, let's have an engine for that, like the thing that we just go to make that game work.
Right.
It's pretty common. It's the idea of engines has happened for a long time, to the point where, even classic games from the 80s and 90s, that you'd hear reference to the engine. I know LucasArts had the Scum engine.
The Scum engine, yeah.
Which is the one they used for all their adventure games for a while, which was, like they developed it to do what I think the original Monkey Island, Secret of Monkey Island. And then it was like, oh, this works really well. Use these tools so that way when you write your next game, you don't have to start over from scratch. Mm-hmm. Cool. Well, the idea of making, is computers and video games became more complex. The idea that like, hey, now we have, everyone had like their engines for all the stuff. Like I want to make a game. I want to do my own game. Hey, there are engines out there, so I don't have to learn the fussy shit about doing graphics on a PlayStation, an Xbox, a Switch, and a Windows system, and a Mac. Like
moving away from having to develop your own proprietary engine to run your game.
The idea I can make my game on this engine.
Right.
So that's cool.
That's cool. There are a handful of companies that became well known for licensing out their engines.
Right. So Unity and Unreal are kind of the two, probably the most popular engines you'll hear. Like Unreal Engine, you'll see that like, oh, built with the Unreal Engine, and then you'll see games that like they open with a Unity logo, right? So those are kind of two of the big ones you see that are like publicly used engines. And so one of them, Unity, it has made an announcement this week that they're like, hey, you know what? Do you love our engine? And you're like, yeah, we do. And they're like, yeah, guess what? Eat shit.
Oh.
Yeah, they basically announced, and it's not the first time that Unity has definitely tried to do something like this, but they basically said, hey, if you use our engine, and you develop your game, they already had like ways you license it. It kind of had to do with how much money you made. So that like if you didn't make much money, they didn't care. Which made it really cool. If you're an indie developer, you can use Unity and not worry about paying big fees. And if you blow up, if your game's popular, then you pay you upgrade. Now they're saying, hey, we have that kind of relationship where it's like depending on how much money you make per year or the lifetime of the game. Now they're saying, but also we're going to add a new cost, which is how many people have installed your game.
Which is a strange metric.
Well, if you think of the proliferation of free-to-play games.
Okay, sure.
Right?
Yeah.
Like the idea that like, oh man, 2 million people install this game, but only 10,000 of them pay more than whatever amount, right?
Sure.
But now, as a company, you may have to pay for every install.
Jeez.
Right? Which is that's
on top of
wild.
the licensing fee for the engine in the first place, right?
Right. Well, they have different like basically plans, right? You can be a Unity Personal or Unity Plus, Unity Pro, Unity Enterprise. So like when you play, I forget like what AAA games, like they're just paying the Unity Enterprise fee, right? Like they're paying the full one, right? Because they're they're Ubisoft, they're whoever. But like when Dan Bethel wants to make a video game by himself.
Not about Long John.
He picks up Unity and starts making a game.
Right.
And he learns stuff. He has a good time with it. Makes his game. And suddenly 3 million people download it. It's a free-to-play game. He now has to pay a lot of money.
So is it as with the update that they made? Is it like from install number 1, or is there like a threshold? Once they hit a certain number, then they have to start paying for installs. I was kind of reading what was being said out there, and it was kind of vague to me.
So my understanding is they still have thresholds of like, hey, you don't pay anything until you get over a certain amount of revenue and a certain number of installs. But then once you do, I believe you pay for it all.
That's wild. Because they're like, you obviously have the money.
Or even if you don't pay for it all, you still pay for everything that happens after that, right? Like, you hit the point, eat shit. And it's like, 20 cents per install is the kind of like the standard monthly rate.
Right.
And you're like, whoa, wait, so every time someone installs my game, I owe you 20 cents.
Yeah.
It's like, that's a lot. Like, if you think about it, especially in the free-to-play game market, right? Think about how many people installed, I don't know, whatever game. Hearthstone. Hearthstone was done with Unity.
Sure.
Right? One of the keys to these games is that a lot of people can play it for free, and then some people pay money.
Right.
So the idea like, hey, man, 100 million people are playing Hearthstone. Great. Times 20 cents. Right? And that's...
Right.
And it's the idea that they're not adding, they didn't add value. They didn't say, hey, we're doing this because we're adding a new feature.
Yeah.
They did it because they can.
Right. And I'm guessing as a way, because there are free to play games like you're saying there, and like they want to get money out of it somehow. If they're not getting it from the players, then they get it from the developers, it sounds like.
Well, and it definitely sounds like they're trying to, what they want to do is they want to pivot people into one of their, like they have some new stupid program of like, oh, here's this feature we added that helps you do things that probably charges you a lot of money for shit. So it's like, oh, if you adopt our whatever it is program, level play, I believe, then they're like, oh, you don't have to pay these fees, but now we take money on other things.
Right. And to play devil's advocate here, like, what is a company like Epic, not Epic, sorry, the company like Unity, Epic owns the Unreal Engine, right? I'm guessing on their side, they're like, we're losing something. Are they losing anything more than money, I guess, by not collecting money per install before this whole sort of endeavor, or like what, were they at risk of collapsing as a company? Do you think?
No.
No. It's just greed. It's just greed.
Well, that would be the thing if they said like, hey, these services, these whatever, like we're providing something.
Right.
But it is kind of like, hey, man, I wrote a thing that lets you do X. Great, you're having a good time with that. Hey, you're not paying me enough. I want more money. I'm now going to update the thing such that you now have to pay me money more often.
Right.
And
so it's like, putting the foot down because they have privilege of just ubiquity.
Well, I believe it's what economist Adam Smith would call rent-seeking behavior, right?
Okay,
it's this idea that like you didn't actually add value in, because like don't get me wrong, Unity was a great thing. They provided a lot of great resources, but they had a payment plan. They had a whole thing. Like if you got over a certain amount of revenue, you had to pay a certain amount. Like it seemed fine. Now out of the blue, they're like, oh, actually, we're going to tape this on. That's why it does feel like we're just doing this because we want more money.
Right.
We want a cut of your big spend. It's like, well, you didn't do anything. To add that, like, this isn't for a service. You already provided the service. You're now just tacking on an extra cost.
Right. I'm not sympathetic, but I kind of I understand kind of the argument in that like all these people are basing games based on ostensibly an IP, for lack of a better word, if you want to call a game engine an IP that you own. I can see people wanting to feel they earn or deserve more money because so many companies are building their own IPs off of your work. But I guess the question I have is, does Unity need the money? Which is, I guess, what you were just speaking.
Well, they may. I don't know. I suspect they don't. I suspect this is a shareholders want a bigger cut. Mm-hmm. And again, I think it goes back to the idea of, I'm not an economist, but, the idea that, hey, you did something that provided value, so you get some compensation for that. Like you take the benefit of the value you add. Great. What happens when you didn't actually do anything to add value? You just have a system in place that lets you extract additional revenue, right?
Right. I guess, the question to be asked is, why is the licensing not enough?
Right. Like, what changed? And that's the thing. Like, again, they apparently didn't do much. I mean, sure, they update the system, but again, that kind of here's a good example, a comparison. Patreon, right? When they were doing a thing and they suddenly say, hey, we're going to increase the cost. We're going to do whatever. We're going to add these extra costs. Right. You're like, well, what is that doing? It's like, well, they were just sold to an investing group and they want more money.
Right.
And there's a question to be had or discussion to be had about, well, what is a fair compensation for the thing you did? Like, hey, you created this thing. How much do you deserve?
Right.
But it is, we talk about Amazon, right? How much money does Amazon deserve for being like the creating a website where you have you can shop and buy stuff, right? Is there a point where actually they've stopped adding value and they're just taking more money? Again, as an economist who I'm told people are fond of, Adam Smith, he discusses this, and it's actually, I like to reference this because while everyone talks about Adam Smith as this, whatever, free market, capitalism, blah, 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 like he actually talks about this is a problem. The idea that someone will, the person with the power to do so will essentially try to extract rent. Rent being a term of art. Like they did it like, I'm not actually doing anything. I'm just charging you more for the thing that was already being done because I can. Right. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the issue at hand here. At least that's based on everything I've seen. Yeah. That's my understanding. They're like, hey, we want more money for the thing that we already did.
Yeah. And we're not in the prediction business, but do you think this is like a like a point of no return for Unity? Like, do you think they fucked up here? Do you think they'll walk it back? I guess, or what do you think
they tried
this
to
means
do
for
this
Unity?
before?
That's
Right.
true. Yeah.
It was not 2 years ago. I think they tried to do the same thing with, like some crypto shit or something. Like they.
Yeah.
This is actually, to me, as someone who doesn't develop indie games, but I follow a lot of people that do.
Mm-hmm.
This is like the second or third time I've seen a big thing of like, well, I guess we're all switching to something else.
Right.
And that's kind of the idea that, yeah, well, some people will switch to something else, but it's hard, right? Like, hey, you wrote your game, Long John the adventure game, in Unity. What do you do? Like, and that's what you're used to doing. Like, you know how to build in this environment. Do you drop everything just to switch to something that won't take you for a ride? I mean, it's tough, right? And I think that's actually, like, for me, I think that's the money shot. That's the whole thing, is that like they want this world where it's essentially a monopoly. Like, you can't not use Unity. You've already invested too much. It's too costly to leave. I think that's the goal.
I wondered, I don't know what the sort of game engine economy generally is. I wonder if they were making this move because they predicted that this is where every game engine provider was going to go. And again, it's still early in this whole drama, but it doesn't seem like Unreal is going to be changing its practices anytime soon, though I don't know if it's operating on the same scale as Unity. They might be serving different clientele, but it just kind of looks like, when you step back, like Unity shit its pants a little bit.
I mean, that's what people think. We'll see what happens, right?
Was it Unity you were working with?
Yeah, I've worked with Unity
A couple years ago.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and I like it.
sure.
Or at least I liked it.
Well, yeah, I mean, as an engine, I'm guessing it's solid, or else.
Yeah,
wouldn't
like
be
it
using
was.
it.
I mean, for me, what was great about Unity is, for me, like, I know how to program ish, and I have ideas, and the idea that you could just take those ideas and implement them very quickly, right?
Right.
Like, I could put together stuff. I mean, I was shocked at how quickly obviously through like tutorials and whatever, but I could have like, oh wow, this is a game that I would have loved to have been able to do, that I would have taken me forever. But now I did it in a couple days, you know?
Right.
That's cool. Like, to have all this graphics and this physics and this other stuff, it's handled for you.
Don't engines, like pre-existing engines, also allow for easier porting, or am I?
Well, it depends on the engine, but like that's one of the things about Unity is that you write your stuff and they actually know how to port it to basically every platform. So like I don't need to learn how to develop a game for the Switch. I can just hit export to Switch.
That's crazy.
Right.
Yeah.
That's the kind of thing. Like that's great, right? That is what is valuable. That's actually why I think a lot of the multi-platform stuff, like you see these indie games that are showing up on every platform. It's because they just hit export to PlayStation, export to whatever.
Well, then they pay the whatever fee,
you know,
certification fee. Yeah. But
like I got to feel bad. I need to stop installing games, right?
right. You're costing developers, Andrew. How dare you? I mean, we actually mentioned it earlier, but like one of if it's safe to say, Andrew, one of both of our favorite games of the year, Dredge, was built in Unity.
Yeah.
As are many other games. Like it's
like so many games, right? Yeah. It's actually, I would say Unity, the deployment of it is to the point where you're like, oh yeah, that's also Unity, right?
Yeah.
It's out there. It's lots of games are doing it. So imagine like actually the company that did Dredge now looking and being like, oh, we're just gonna have to start paying. Now they're not a free to play, so it doesn't like they just raise their price, right? It's really the free to plays where it's like, oh, you're gonna have an installation cost, right?
Right.
We don't have a price to install, so that can be devastating.
Right. Yeah, it can be, especially. I mean, 20 cents doesn't sound like a lot, but if you have a hit, like what was that game? The early Xbox Summer of Arcade or whatever it's called, Super Meat Boy. That game exploded, right? Like, if they had to pay for every install, that company would have been sunk.
Well, and think about the companies that do like Xbox Game Pass.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
Now suddenly those negotiations.
A lot of them are owned by Xbox at this point.
Well, but like, or when Epic does free games or whatever it was, like they would pay the company money. Mm-hmm. Now it's like, well, we have to include the fact that if every motherfucker that has this is installing it, you need to pay for that, right?
Jeez, yeah. So I kind of wonder, not to get graphic here, but I wonder, did Unity just slit its own throat in a way? Are people just going to be looking elsewhere for other engines? Because there's Unreal, but I've been hearing a lot about, was it Godot?
Godot is one that's essentially open source.
Oh, okay.
So it exists. There are others as well, like Phaser. Phaser, which is a web-based one, but you can wrap it in a I forget, a Chromium package or whatever. So like there are definitely other options. I mean, we'll see what happens.
Right.
I know I see people that are saying like, well, I guess it's time to learn Godot,
Right. Yeah, seeing developers say that too. Like that's how I learned about it. Like I was seeing posts about Unity's move here through developer statements on Twitter. I'm going to call it Twitter. I'm not going to call it X because that's dumb. But yeah. So I think it's also interesting that developers are speaking out against this move, which tends to speak because developers can be pretty apologetic for a lot of moves made by behind the scenes tools and stuff like that. But clearly, this was a step over the line, and that sucks. So we'll keep you up to date, dear listeners, about sort of the progression of what Unity does in the next few days or weeks or whatever, because it was a complete fumble.
That's what it feels like, but we'll see. Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's It's, oof.
Would it just be enough for them to walk this back, or do you think they've damaged the brand beyond repair?
Well, to me, like they'd already done something like this when they made their weird crypto pivot like a year or two ago. NFT thing. Because that was I think the last time I saw everyone say like, "Welp, maybe Unity," or actually they did even some other thing. They always have these announcements that are like, "This is garbage.
Right.
You just want more money." I don't know because again, people are still using Unity. Right, so maybe it's not that bad.
Yeah. I mean, I guess if their initial licensing prices aren't too bad, I guess. I don't know. Again, I guess people could be. I could see the counter argument being, well, like I don't plan to make games that sell that many copies where I start hitting that threshold. But you're not in charge of that, right? If you have a hit game, you have a hit game.
Well, that's always the weird thing is like. And I get how they run the business, but it's always weird. Like, well, if you sell over this many, or you have this much revenue, you're like, oh shit, okay. I guess I don't want to be successful,
Right? Well, hey, if anything, it's fostering the indie community, and I'm all for that. But I don't want the message going out to the indie community is to fail. That doesn't seem to be good for him.
Right. Well, and I think the one concern I've seen some people say is, hey, man, Unreal's watching right now.
For sure.
And they're basically going to say, how do people respond to this? Mm-hmm. Right? If people just say, you know what? Okay, I'll eat this shit sandwich. Then Unreal's going to do it too.
Right.
Right? Because they know they can.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, we'll see. Hopefully it doesn't hopefully it doesn't push that domino, right? And
I hope not, but
yeah. But that's the thing with any industry. Like it keeps, I want to say growing, but definitely changing over time. And especially when investors and stockholders are involved, at some point they start making real bad decisions.
Yep.
But that's the thing with Unreal, though. Like it's owned by what's the Epic? Yeah, and they make billions of dollars from Fortnite already, so maybe they don't feel the incentive to
No, man. That's the
gouge.
problem, right? It's this idea that, like, yeah, we don't have to, but we can.
Right?
And that's actually what, like, makes me so crazy is that, like, yeah, you're right. Epic doesn't need to, right? But they can. Yeah. And you know they will if they think they can. So, anyway.
Right. What's the line? Is it from Jurassic Park? Like, we spent so much time thinking about whether we could. We never thought about if we should.
Right.
Right. So, there we go. Yeah. Yet another case of Jurassic Park being the truth. What was his name? What was the character's name? Dr. Oh, God. My brain doesn't work. Never mind.
All right. Good
Chaos
talk.
theory. Chaos theory, Andrew. That's my life.
Malcolm something, right?
Malcolm, yes. Oh, fuck. Malcolm Reynolds? No, that's the Firefly guy. Malcolm. What? You know what? Let's not worry about it. Andrew's going to figure it out right now. Malcolm.
Jurassic Park. Malcolm. Ian Malcolm.
There we go. Dr. Malcolm. There we go. Well, I mean, the joke is dead at this point, so whatever.
Oh, sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Life finds a way. So if you, dear listeners, have any thoughts about the topics we discussed this week, feel free to leave your thoughts as comments on the page for this episode at forallintents.net.
You can also post your comments or engage in conversations with other listeners on our Facebook page.
You can find us on other social media as well, specifically the places that we frequent, which means you can find me on Instagram at @Bethel and you can find Andrew on Mastodon at profounddark at dice.camp.
While you're at our website, forallintents.net, you can also take a look at our YouTube page, which you can find by clicking on the link in the corner that says YouTube. There you'll find this show, which, if you are listening to it on YouTube, please feel free to like and subscribe, or as the kids like to say, ring that bell.
We use two tracks of music for our show. One is called Disco Medusae, the other is called District 4, both written and performed by Kevin McLeod, the Clan McLeod, immortal swordsman, graph paper enthusiast, and musician extraordinaire.
You can find his music and more at incompetech.filmmusic.io, and that's all licensed under the Creative Commons 4.0 attribution license.
If you like the show and like to help us out, the best way to do so would be to subscribe to the show using whichever podcasting service you happen to use. What would help us out even more, though, would be to leave some sort of review. Whether a text review or using their proprietary metric will spread the word to new potential listeners through the magic of algorithms. Andrew, I'm a sellout, I guess, but I'm not ashamed. I have joined the current generation of video game consoles and bought a PlayStation 5. I know you're upset. Deal with it.
That's fine. Whatever,
but
man.
Do you know what I've done with this brick of processing power? And it is a brick.
To heat your bedroom?
No. It's too big for my bedroom. It looks like the sister building to the Sydney Opera House. It's crazy. And it's just as big. Even though it came with the new God of War Ragnarok, a game I've been wanting to play. I, of course, the first game I played, and because it's fully compatible with PlayStation 4, so it's kind of in terms of my library, it's a lateral move. I can just, hey, I was playing this game on my PlayStation 4. I can just download that and keep going from where I was going, right? Because cloud saves and all that fun stuff. But I noticed that the game Stray, my kind of
cat game
thing of the year from 2022, the post-apocalyptic cat game. My purchase of it on the PlayStation 4 included the PlayStation 5 version. I'm like, well, if I download the PlayStation 5 version, it'll be prettier and probably run smoother. But my save doesn't transfer. Oh, darn. I have to play Stray all over again. Oh, no. And so I've played Stray all over again. And basically getting all the collectibles, getting 100%ing the game, and I have no regrets. So what I did with my PlayStation 5, dear listeners, was I played a game I've already played.
That you played a year ago.
Multiple times a year ago as well. I played the game at least 3 times last year. And what have I? So once I kind of put that down, what I do next? I'm like, I wonder if that Black Sad adventure game actually runs on the PlayStation 5. It does.
Oh.
So I'm finally playing a game I couldn't play last year because my old ass PlayStation was not powerful enough for actually a poorly made game. But you know what? I'm running with it. I'm having fun. One of these days, I'll actually play an actual current gen video game.
That's great.
Yeah.
So excited for you.
Thank you. And maybe next time, Andrew, I'll get a gaming personal computer. Where that's where the true gamers with the Z are at.
No. Whatever. Yourself. You know what? You enjoy yourself, sir.
Indeed. And so I have been. I should also say thank you to everybody that maybe hopefully came out. We're recording this before it happens, but it comes out after it happens. To CrockerCon 2023. It happened this week on Thursday. I'm sure it was another fantastic event. All I know is that I'm looking forward to it, and I just found out today I'll be doing a panel for the last half hour of the show, talking about indie comics and self-publishing and all that stuff with friend of the show Kyron Silva and also local creator Robert Love. So I hope it was good. That's the problem with time travel as we do.
Right, and I actually hope nothing like catastrophic happens. Like,
dude, that would be horrible.
Hope it's good. Like, well, actually, there was something terrible happened. Like, yikes.
So until you avoid something terrible happening, I'm D. Bethel.
And I'm Andrew Asplin.
And for all intents and purposes,
that was a podcast.
I'm just broken on the inside.
Not. Yes.
Are we all?
Yes.
Good enough. Good enough. Let's talk about video games.
I saw that. I was like, ooh.
Hey, YouTube, what do you think about this? They're like, oh shit, that's John Williams, bro.
John fucking Williams.
That's John. That's a first draft of John Williams. That's him singing that into his voice memos. I think John Williams, 75-year-old John Williams, walking on the street. He's like, hold on. Beep boop boop. I mean, if we'd known years ago that the short cast should just be our main cast, then we wouldn't have gone off on a rail for months with a whole side series called Shortcasts.